before Christmas last year, I was getting my teeth inspected when my dentist told me a story. We were talking about the holidays, or he was while I blinked and drooled. Anyway, Dr. Floss, a practicing Catholic, had come around the corner one evening at home to discover his boy on his knees, hands clasped, fervently praying to Santa Claus. No kidding, I tried to say. I guess it made sense. Santa is a magical older man who never dies. He sees you when you can't see him. He somehow appears everywhere at once. He grants wishes earnestly expressed. He's generous, but he can also be pretty judgmental. You can see the resemblance, can't you? I had never thought about it before, but of course it would be natural for a child to confuse Santa with God, to confuse Father Christmas with God the Father. Santa is sort of the child's version of God, jolly rather than sorrowful, vengeful, or fierce. Santa and God, in fact, Santa and gods, plural, have a lot in common. They're stories you learn from your parents and your culture when you're a kid, and whether you believe those stories or not can be a big dividing line between people. With Santa, that division usually dissolves by itself over time. This is my daughter Lena on the right at age 4 with her best friend Marlise. That's about when Lena asked me why Santa went to Marlise's house and not hers. So I told her, Santa's just pretend. But please, don't tell Marlise. Lena never did. Now Marlise was no fool. She believed in Santa Claus because she'd been presented with convincing evidence. The presents under the tree, the empty cookie plate, grown-ups talking about Santa as if Santa were as real as the dentist. And let's not forget, actual Santa Claus in the flesh at the mall between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekdays. All that physical evidence is hard to deny until it becomes hard to accept. How did that bike get down the chimney? And how does Santa get everywhere in one night? And how come I just saw 2 Santas together at the food court? Eventually, the child moves from believing to wondering to suspecting to understanding. I was raised Jewish, but thanks to my parents' love of shopping and shiny objects, I too got to participate in this rite of passage, believing in Santa and then not believing in Santa. We had a tree with a Jewish star which we put up on Christmas Eve and took down a week later, or earlier if the rabbi were stopping by. That's my big sister on the left. She may look like she would have blabbed, but she never told me about Santa. In fact, after she was bat mitzvah, she got to help be Santa, apparently a privilege of Jewish adulthood. She filled my stocking for 2 years, during which time I knew Santa was a fiction, but kept quiet for the sake of our little sister Sadie. Not really believing, but keeping quiet about it, is, I'm convinced, a common occurrence. In the short term with Santa, but in the long term with God, too. I do know of one girl who refused to go to church after she learned there was no Santa, having concluded that everything her parents had insisted she take on faith was in fact made up. Her loss of faith isn't unusual, but her announcement is. More often, people lose their faith in God quietly, even secretly, while still going to church and synagogue, still having their children baptized or bar mitzvahed, still telling their kids, Grandma went to heaven. Why do they act like they believe God exists when they don't? Why are they teaching their children to believe when they themselves do not? Why do they say things like, I believe in God, just not, an actual being who has agency? Isn't that like saying they believe in Santa, just not the guy in the red suit? It could be that, like Lena, they don't want to upset anyone who believes in something they do not. They don't want to fight with their parents. Or they're afraid that if they say out loud they don't believe in God, they will all of a sudden become hard-hearted materialists who don't believe in love either, or hope, or wonder, or puppies. It could be none of my business whether they come out as atheists or not. I guess that's possible. But I can't help thinking that if they would, attitudes in this country would shift a little. And that Lena, who finally can talk to her friends about Santa, won't feel she has to keep quiet the rest of her life about other things she believes, or doesn't. It sounds like a lot to ask, but remember, people can go slow, like with Santa. That's my sister Sadie showing off her new skirt. When she found out about Santa and the whole family knew, Christmas didn't end. Instead, we all participated in the Santa story, like we were putting on a play about generosity and abundance. We'd say, "Oh, that Santa, forever leaving on the price tags," or "Aw, Santa remembered." I guess we still believed in Santa, just not the guy in the red suit. So we put quotation marks around his name to turn him from a real being into an idea. I think some people do that with God, too. Maybe that's why my dentist wasn't worried his son had confused God with Santa. If they're both in quotation marks, both great ideas rather than actual beings, why would it matter? What was real was the generosity they inspired in his child, who'd been praying for Santa to give his presents to other, needier kids. Maybe you've stopped believing, or you've never believed, in a man in the sky who can grant wishes, but you haven't said it out loud in public, or even to yourself, because you're afraid of upsetting someone, or because you simply don't want to give up the beautiful, comforting, inspiring things about religion. You could start, if you wanted to, by adding quotation marks, loud ones that my daughter can hear. So she'll know that a story can inspire and enlighten and yes, even bring gifts without actually being true. Of course, if you think the story actually is true, then please disregard this talk, and I mean this sincerely. God bless.